got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to our daily gun show. We come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern for about an hour each night. Talk about guns and let's see what episode we're on. So it's Tuesday, 22nd, and we've got a couple people joining us right off the bat in the as co-hosts here, and we got some people jumping in on the YouTube side. We simulcast it over at Gun Channels, of course. Looks like there's a couple people over there as well. So we've got Cycle Camp jumping in from Connecticut. Thanks for joining.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
And we got Gary jumping in from Kansas.
Kansas, that's correct. And thanks for the invite.
For some reason, I keep wanting to put the Nebraska guys in Kansas all the time. So I want to make sure I wasn't putting you in Nebraska.
It's pretty close.
Then we got Jelsma also in Arkansas / Nebraska. Thanks for jumping in.
Or Tejas, whatever it is. But yeah, thanks.
Nebraska border. All right, well, thanks for jumping in, guys. I don't have any topic tonight. Got a bunch of people jumping in from the YouTube side. Of course, we got the Gun Channel side. And Clay says he has one bar. Wonder where he is. He might be out driving around or something. Potato says he'll take a link, so I'll throw him a link out there. Anything new? Anything going on with y'all?
No, I've just been reading through the news and stuff. It seems like ghost guns are becoming a big thing. I had an article that says untraceable firearms in the hands of hobbyist felons and children. So I've been trying to read through that tonight.
Is that like they're trying to make a thing out of it, you think, or it already is a thing and they're just jumping on?
So far, what I'm reading is they're just really trying to make a thing out of it. I think they're going for the kind of a scare tactic here that anybody and everybody can really just get a hold of hand tools or power tools and start making guns in their garage. So
yeah, it's kind of true. I mean, if they're going to get all worried about it, you can go to any Home Depot and get a couple of pieces of pipe, shotgun shell. And if you don't have a shotgun shell, you can just get some matches and some pipe and some solder, I guess.
I mean, even simplistic, you don't even have to use solder, man. It's all bolt together stuff.
Oh,
there's plenty of information for slam fired 12 gauges out there. Plenty of it.
But I guess it's sensational or whatever. They get to suggest that there's another nefarious thing happening in the dark underworlds, and firearms are to blame.
Yeah, or in countries that need to defend themselves against foreign invaders, i.e. the Philippines.
Philippines.
Well, the real deal here, and I testified about this recently, and the whole deal is whether guns are serialized or not really doesn't mean anything because they use the serial numbers to look them up after the fact. So there's no preventive part of this. There's nothing that just making people serialize their guns or telling people they can't build guns without serial numbers does not stop people from committing crimes. And the use of those serial numbers is only to track the provenance of the gun after the crime has already been committed. And in fact, if you look at the statistics, ATF only actually is usually able to track about 1 out of every 2. Their ATF ratio is about 50%.
I'd be surprised if it was even that much, but exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing. They're playing on this perception that somehow by having a serial number, now everything's okay. And that's that. Is it just the steps or the slippery slope, or whatever you want to call it, like the the
Well, it's a
steps
false
towards-
argument. The whole deal is it's a false argument. Serialized guns do not make you safer.
Well, I know, but that's what I'm saying. So is that part of a step, or is that part of a slippery slope where they're like, oh, well, once we get these serialized guns, that's a reasonable thing. Like, let's get these serialized guns. Oh, crime didn't go away. Well, what can we go after next?
Well, no, now we have the serial numbers of everybody who owns the guns, so let's go get the guns.
Well,
That's what the
exactly.
whole thing is about. It's about gun registration. They don't want unregistered guns floating around in the public.
I tend to agree. But where was this article? Is this, again, like, is this in response to something, or like they were just looking for something to talk about, so they brought it up?
No, it's off of a small news station, WJLA Channel 7. It's basically something that it looks like they just pulled up to try to talk about stuff. I know the station down in Beaumont tries to do it too. They were talking about children's helicopter toys being a nuisance, like the drones. So, I mean, sometimes these small news stations got to bring something up to make themselves relevant, I guess, because they're kind of a dying form of media.
Oh yeah, did you see that thing that Moon posted? I think it was Moon posted on the main page a few days ago. It was sort of about that topic, like what the media's got to resort to in order to, and why these atrocities at schools are such perfect fodder for their thing, because it gets people to monitor the news and pay attention out of nowhere for updates and that kind of thing.
Right, and I mean, it was a very valid point that he put out too, because that's really all they do. They prey on the next biggest break. They're not actually becoming journalists as they were through the 19th century to find out what's actually happening. They're literally waiting, and let's say they're chasing ambulances to a point to go out there and just try to either make news or find news that's big enough to make a story out of.
They like to look and see what's popular and then try to find a story that they can put out that's along those lines, you know. You'll see 10 stories about one topic come out within a week because that's the buzz thing. That's what's popping right now.
I know that I've seen a couple of times where, like, whatever news I'm tend to watch or hear, at least, I don't go seek it out, but it's like it'll be on the radio where I'm at, will be conservative stuff, and often they'll focus on that, where like every single news thing is using like a keyword phrase, like as though they've been instructed. Today we're going to use this keyword phrase, like we're going to put this into the jargon this today, and they'll focus on that, and I wonder how much of that is like orchestrated, or how much of that is just lazy, like, oh, there's a story, pick it up and run with it. Comes on the fax machine or whatever happens.
That's the other bothersome thing about media channels as well, is they start almost to a point fabricating a rumor of something that happened. Because let's say a guy robs a bank and it's only one man who's actually in there and no money is stolen, and really what happened is he sneezed and his gun fell on the floor. There's no robbery actually happening, but they're going to report the robbery and there's 30 people in there and 5 dead and countless millions of dollars been stolen, and the next day they'll just report what actually gets reported, what was real, but they're trying to get like the shock effect. And I just, yeah, like I said, it's kind of a dying form of media. And yeah,
Well, everyone wants to have the story first. There was the one guy in Ohio, I think. Yeah, he was at Ohio State, and he stabbed a couple people and then tried to run some people over with a car, and the news was reporting it as an active shooter situation, and the only guns there were the guns the cops were carrying.
Nice.
hashtag fake news.
I think that's why I miss out on all the good news stories anymore, because I just refuse to watch it. There's really no point.
I mean, that was like a big decision for my like me and my wife. I think years ago, we were sitting there and we were watching cable, and it's like, why do we actually pay for TV? And this is maybe 7 years ago now, maybe 8 years, and like since then, it's just haven't had any TV, cable, and everything. It's like, oh, did you hear about this? I said no, because it hasn't happened on social media yet, so it's probably not true.
Well,
About
I,
the
I
only,
enjoy the filter of social media. I do not watch the news, and I do not take a newspaper. The only time I watch the news is when there's an actual real, like a hurricane weather event or that kind of thing. It has to be pretty big for me to turn the news on. But I find in social media, I get a better, I'm able to pick my sources to people that are more rational thinking and who don't just, like you guys were talking about earlier, they don't jump on top of it just to be first. So they'll say anything, just to be first. Most of the guys I know are here are the, here are the few little facts we know, and and then you come back a half hour later and you find out what's really going on.
So, how long do you think, or do you think we're moving towards everyone's just going to be like that, or do you think it'll go somewhere else? Because I don't think. I mean, does anybody think that the old three networks will somehow figure it out and come back and be dominant again?
No, what I think is the government is going to take over social media, and then the same thing that happened to the commercial airwaves will then happen to social media, and we'll have to find some other way to do it.
I don't
What do you
think.
mean over the social media? What do you mean by that?
I mean that they will take and put people who give an accurate account of stuff and either find some reason to get them off the air or use network not neutrality to slow them down so people can't get to them, or any of those kind of evil things that their buddies in the propaganda business will pay them to do.
I don't think the major news networks will ever be on top again, but I don't see them ever going away, to be honest.
I mean, look at MSNBC and CNN and all these guys have web-based outlets.
So that's what I'm saying. You think they'll just get savvy with it and keep their influence? Or do you think people get savvy and be like, yeah, you know what? We don't need that single point of view?
I think they've already lost a lot of it.
I think a lot of people recognize now. I mean, I know a lot of people who actually watch one left biased channel and one right biased channel, and then just kind of mash them together and try to figure it out. But that takes a lot of effort on people's parts, and I think they're going to get tired of it. I think they're just going to get tired of this whole, every time they put their foot in it really badly, and they've done this badly, a few of them, it just gets harder and harder for people to say, yeah, I'll stick with broadcast TV.
Well, I think a lot of that is the older generation as it moves on. I think they're kind of losing their base to be able to actually scare on top of that. I don't think the younger generation is actually paying attention to the news, like the big news stations to actually get their news from. So if they have a commanding presence on social media, then I think that news force might actually be sticking around, but just in a different format.
That's interesting. Yeah, like they don't have the reputation or the whatever, like with the old people.
Right, because once all your cable subscribers are gone, I mean, there's no point to have the news anchor sitting up there behind the desk because nobody's watching him. So what do they go to? They go to social media. They go to mass emailing. I mean, they're going to start sending newsletters. I mean, that's really and not beyond what they're probably going to do. I mean, getting in bed with larger organizations, say Microsoft or Google or something like that, and become a distributor of information for larger corporations, maybe even.
Well, you got to look at where the money is too. I mean, people like Zuckerberg and stuff like that behind Facebook, he could easily take over some of the news media too.
If he hasn't already.
Well, that's already happened. AOL took over Time Warner. They just ruined it in a way. Well, in a lot of ways. Because just because you're bigger and more powerful doesn't mean you know what you're doing. But I think that was also many years ago. The internet was still pretty new back then.
Well, I mean, it really comes down, we don't have Uncle Walter anymore. Cronkite, up until the very end of his career, Cronkite did not editorialize. He said, "This is what we think is happening, and good night." And he didn't try to spin that stuff. I mean, he showed emotion on the TV once in a while, but basically, I mean, I can't remember Cronkite ever having to retract himself. Come on the next night and say, "Hey, we said this and we were wrong." Of course, they don't do it now anyway. But and you know what? I would give a station props for doing that. If I was watching a station and they said 4 or 5 things and it turned out that 3 of them were wrong, and they came on the next day and say, "Hey, we," and not in a page 6 kind of way, you know what I mean? But to come up and say, "Hey, the big story yesterday, hey, we got some of that wrong, and here's the corrected information, and we'll do better next time." But they think they can tell us anything they want, and we'll just eat it up. And that's part of the problem with the conversations we have, because people quote bad headlines, and people like people are still telling me that the what do you call it? The bump stock was used in Las Vegas, and there hasn't been a single piece of verified forensic evidence put on the table that says it's true. There's a lot of experts, paid experts that come around saying, "Oh yeah, we listened to the audio at a rate of fire, blah blah blah." But all it's going to take is for somebody to just say, "Okay, here's a bullet, here's a test fired bullet, here's a bullet that hit somebody. Oh look, same gun." And yet they say, "Oh no, I read a CNN article that said it was used. I read a NBC article that said it was used." And every single one of them, and this was part of my testimony, I spent like a couple of hours one day digging into all of these flashy headlines. And in every single case, there was a paragraph inside that said, "Yeah, nobody's really determined if he used it," or it was our source, who we're not going to name, that's not an official anything, says that this is true. And it's really hard to argue with people about stuff like that, because the smoke screen that you get from the news media is just so thick.
So when you did your speech to the House in Connecticut?
Judiciary Committee.
Sorry, the Judiciary, that was in regards to bump stock, and you were doing research into the news articles. How much of that did you get out? Like all the stuff?
Oh, I got to tell them that it was bump stocks and ghost guns.
Okay.
They had, and of course they went ahead and passed the bump stock bill, but the ghost guns bills, it got out of committee, but it never got to the Senate floor before the session quit. But I did not consider it a very successful session. I was pretty grouched off because it was just stupid. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Now, did anybody else have points or anything that they brought up that you hadn't thought of that were relevant or that were worth relaying or whatever?
Yeah, I think there were people that said other things. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but there were a couple people that came at the laws from a little bit different perspective than I did. and they had what I thought was kind of neat was people had some really good like unintended consequences stuff. Like one guy talked about his apparently guys that do paintball use the trigger cranks for paintball.
Oh yeah.
And it does. Bill as passed, a trigger crank is illegal no matter what. And if that trigger crank, a lot of them are just clip-ons, right? You clamp them onto the trigger guard assembly there, and you just use them. Well, if you had one at home for a paintball and they could prove that fits some other real gun, that's it. You're going to jail.
But it just fits on a gun. You don't even have to have the gun.
Right. You don't even have to own that, because we asked about that. We specifically asked about that. And basically they came up and said, no, possession of that implement is illegal. Done.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to be consistent.
If you own a silencer that ain't registered, they don't give a shit if you have a gun or not. If you own a silencer, you own a silencer. If you haven't paid the tax, you're going to jail. Sorry.
No, it's interesting. So I guess that was really what I was asking, if anybody had come at it from different angles that you thought were interesting. But anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of a good point about the ghost guns not really getting through that far. Anyways, how are you going to regulate something like that, where literally all you need is basic hand tools, supply and pieces, and there's so many different ways to manufacture anything in your home, be it kitchen sink or cast iron skillet or whatever. I mean, it's a thing. It's an inanimate thing. It's not like it requires special knowledge of anything.
And unintended consequences on that one, we said, well, what about all the guns we have that were made before 1968 that weren't used by the military and where the manufacturer didn't voluntarily serialize them? I've got several guns that don't have serial numbers on them because that's how they were made.
And that was going to be included in your ghost gun thing, like guns that already exist that weren't even being created.
They did not have language that excluded them.
Crazy.
So, again, we did the same thing. I said, and you're telling me I've got guns that are like 100 and some odd years old, and what do you want me to do? Go get an electric pencil and start carving numbers into them? You're going to destroy the value.
Yeah.
So I was really pissed off about that. But
now, again, they didn't vote on that. Was that due to people's concerns?
No, they just ran out of time.
Okay.
They had more important things. They had bigger fish to fry. They passed a bump stock bill, and I think they said, well, we'll take that as a win and keep on going.
I think a lot of states did that.
Yeah. But it's just stupid because it doesn't solve. It's not proactive. It doesn't stop the cause of the shooting. And if it doesn't stop the cause of the shooting, and if a person just has to ignore the law and he can still do what he wants to do, then I just don't get it. So, I'm just too common sense for common sense gun laws.
Well, that's literally the thing. And one of the analogies that I heard was that banning bump stocks to stop mass shootings is like banning straws to keep people from getting fat.
Yeah. It's just crazy. But anyway, enough political hacking. I can't watch the news now because my television decided to croak on me today. I am having the worst couple of weeks. Everything I touch breaks. It's awful.
I'd like you to do your best to touch the NFA as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'll have to find out where the local office is.
Like, can I just take a look at that? Oh, it broke. Sorry. Yeah. Use the same one. Great. All right, so I'm looking at the chats to see what's going on. Looks like Angelina's out there saying potatoes and pants for some reason. It's an internal link. Anybody know where she's at? I think I've seen.
Yeah, she was looking for one earlier. I put it in the side chat, but I guess she didn't see it.
Oh no, it was over there drawing. It was
That's
coloring.
okay, no problem.
Um,
I really enjoy watching it. That's kind of neat.
trying to regulate ghost guns by removing the knowledge. So,
Well, our state took a different approach. Our state just said they wanted to ban the importation of guns like that, kits like that. But then what they really wanted to do was they wanted to say you can make a gun, you can still build one. It's okay for you to still make your own gun, but you have to come to us and get a number, kind of like if you make your own trailer. If you make your own trailer, you have to go to the state and get a serial number to stamp on that trailer, even if that's a new thing that we just did like 10 or 12 years ago. Well, they want to do the same thing with the guns. They're saying you can still make them, but before you get them to the point where they're functional, you have to have contacted us and got paperwork. And of course, there's going to be a fee involved, but they didn't talk about what the fee was going to be. And what was killing us was our guys are overloaded. They got 10,000 transfers just from regular gun transfers in Connecticut that are sitting on a backlog that nobody's processed. And this is the same bunch of people that would have to be responsible for giving people serial numbers for home manufactured guns or 80% lowers that they want to finish.
and of course, they didn't have anything like to deal with, like, the law goes into effect on the 31st of this month. So the first you're a felon, but you've put in your paperwork 3 months earlier and you haven't gotten it back yet.
Right. Well, and they didn't allocate any money for this extra effort, and they didn't ask for more people. So I'm kind of glad they didn't pass it, because it was just stupid all the way around. No forethought at all. Again, here's your unintended consequences. Wow. See, they're just trying to slow us down because they're not going to put the infrastructure in place for us to be able to do it according to the new rules. So I'm glad it didn't make it.
Well, if we just bring in the mongooses to eat the rats, then the mongooses will die when the rats are gone, right? They won't eat anything else?
Well, that's what happened with up in Vermont with the porcupines. They had a horrible problem with porcupines and dairy cows sticking their face in porcupines and costing them all kinds of money to depuncture a cow. So they said, oh, let's bring these fisher cats in, and the fisher cats will eat the porcupines. Well, the fisher cats figured out that squirrels and chipmunks and other animals were a hell of a lot easier to get at than a porcupine, and they wiped out the squirrel. You didn't see a gray squirrel in Vermont for like 15 years because those fisher cats came in and wiped them all out.
What is a fisher cat? I don't even think I know what that is.
Oh, fisher cat's kind of like
a cat that
like
carries a fishing pole.
Yeah, it's kind of like a wolverine, only a little longer and thinner.
But
they're very
wild.
fast. I'm told they're very fast.
They're wild though, not like a tamed animal.
Yeah, you don't see them around people's houses.
Huh. Where'd they get them from?
They imported them from Europe.
Huh. Well, that's what you get for importing stuff from Europe. Should learn from that. Ghost gun says ATF says you can manufacture your own firearms. Ghost gun laws are illegal. All right.
No, because ATF is a regulatory organization and doesn't make law. And
Correct.
It's okay for states to make stricter laws than the feds. They just can't make looser laws than the feds.
Correct. So we have a broad federal law. Well, first we have in the 1791 piece of paper that says, here's what the government cannot do. And it acknowledges that we have a foreign right and that they can't infringe on that. And then it says anything not listed here is the power of the states, right?
Right.
Then it goes along, and like you said, it says that the states can do whatever they want. They just can't do anything more powerful than the federal one, but the federal one doesn't grant us anything. So the state one, I guess, can come along and infringe and What? How does that work?
Most people I know say the ATF can't technically regulate us anyway because shall not be infringed. And the states can't because of the 14th Amendment saying that, you've got this right in the Bill of Rights, the states can't step on it. But, who cares? That's only for people that can read and care about their history and all that.
Bob's saying that those things are like a weasel.
Well, it's like a really big weasel. Yeah. They have a long, fluffy tail like a fox. They have a long body and they're a little bit low to the ground. They have big claws and they have more of a wolf-like face. So they're awesome. I mean, fisher cats are just awesome. But you almost never see them because they're so quick. I saw one on Facebook the other day. Somebody had actually shot one in his yard, which was amazing.
Well, what I was actually trying to get at with the the mongoose analogy for killing the rats is, even though you have good intentions of introducing a lot of these things, it will always end up badly when you try to introduce more to regulate the less. So introducing anything to try to regulate something that doesn't need to be regulated to begin with, i.e. giving laws that criminals are just going to break to begin with, is kind of pointless. It's going to do more harm than it is good.
Well, they asked the head of the state police during the testimony, has anybody ever been what do you call it, charged or convicted with of using a gun without a serial number in a crime? And he said, nope, not that I know of. So,
and then the question should have been, has a serial number ever been like useful or critical or at all useful in the what do you call it, investigation of a crime? Because I think we're just taking that for granted. So let's say somebody does something horrible with a gun, and then there's a serial number on the gun, and then the police go through a bunch of trouble to track that gun to the person they got it from. And that was somebody, and then they went to all the trouble of going to the next person, and that was somebody else. And then maybe the next person was a gun shop, and the next person was a distributor, and the next person was the manufacturer. Like,
sure,
do we need to know that? Do we care where the car came from that they did things with? Do we care about the shoes? I mean, I guess
care if it was maybe stolen, but to return the guy's property.
I suppose, but I would say, like, if it was used in the crime, sure. But I'm wondering how often these things are, because they're firearms, we're giving them, and because we have the tools, that they're like, oh, well, now let's search these things. I mean, I don't know if it's, maybe I'm wrong and I don't know enough about law enforcement, but I'd be curious to see some numbers on how often these serial numbers, and the whole part about serial numbers, how often that's useful in solving crimes. And then it should be possible to get a number from the industry on how much it costs to keep track. Can you imagine how much it costs, not just to put a roll mark serial number on something, because that means you can't just make something. Now you got to make something and have an incremental serial number thingy there. You can't just put a serial number on it that's different. You have to be like literally worried about it so that every single one is unique and different. And then literally as it goes through that machine, you have to comply with regulations. So as soon as it goes through that machine, it's no longer a piece of metal. Now it is an actual firearm, and the place where that happens is under license. And there's all kinds of obligations and responsibilities there. And then every moment that thing exists for the rest of time, it's going to technically be, something's aware of it. And I'm wondering, all that cost, we keep forgetting that there's hundreds of millions of guns. There's supposed to be a gun for every person. Of course, not all of those are made with serial numbers, but a whole chunk of them are. What's the cost of all that? And I mean, I guess, you're not supposed to say there's a cost on life or whatever, but if I highly doubt there's too many lives being saved by serial numbers. I think it's just a bunch of theater. And I think it's a step towards registration and confiscation and removal of firearms. So I don't see it as being necessary for anything other than that. And has there been? I haven't seen anything. Does anybody else happen to see anything that would put any scrutiny on the costs of it?
I haven't seen anything about the cost, but I did an analysis. I got records from that someone had got through a Freedom of Information Act, and they basically went to the state and they found all of the charges for gun related charges that you could get. And they went through and they split them up and they did them by 4 categories. They did the guy was charged with it, then he either got off or he got convicted or the charge got nollied. And the nollie is the one where the prosecutor just drops a charge and says, we're not going to prosecute this. And one of my pieces of testimony was that if you looked at all of the different kind of charges, because it's illegal to deface a firearm, to intentionally obscure the manufacturer's serial number information, all that shit's already illegal in Connecticut. And when we went back, and this thing went all the way back to like 2007 or something like that, really went far back. Guess what the nollie rate was on all of those charges?
And what's a nollie again?
A nollie means we just choose not to prosecute. We drop the charge.
Well, 100%?
It was 100%.
Because I'm guessing as soon as you said that's because they don't want to make it look like they've got a bunch of gun charges in their area, make them look bad and get insurance rates up, and people won't want to live there because there's all these gun crimes when, like you say, having something dumb paperwork error is a gun crime technically. You know the reason they don't charge people with gun-related crimes? Why is that?
Because they're mandatory minimum sentencing.
Oh, okay.
It takes the control out of the judge's hands, which we think is good, right? That's why you had mandatory minimum sentencing in the first place. But the prosecutors figured out that the way to get around that is if the charge doesn't come into the court, he can't enforce it. So when the prosecutor puts his case on the table, he just ignores the ones he doesn't want to deal with, and he uses them to buy confessions for people. Or see, our guys would rather put a guy in for 2 years and throw away all the felony charges than put him in the jail for 20 years like they ought to.
Well, there's a couple things you're bringing up there. What do you guys think of the mandatory minimums?
I love most of them.
I listened to a lot of System of a Down when I was growing up, and I'm against mandatory minimums.
Yeah, I don't like the concept. I don't think the idea was to take power from the judges. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought the idea was to scare people into thinking, oh, I can't work on a judge. Like my people skills aren't going to get me out of this one. Like I can't talk my way out of this. If I'm doing something, I got a mandatory minimum. Are you saying they were more of a judge deterrent?
No. The whole point was that these guys would get hit with harder time.
Yeah. Okay.
But it also did not allow the judge to say, well, the sentencing, the judges got to abide by the sentencing guidelines or the sentences that are written by the Senate and the House. When they make these laws and they assign the penalties, judges can't just go through waiving that stuff or they'll get disbarred. Whatever the equivalent is for a judge, they'll get under judicial review and all that kind of stuff. And it's just irritating. You read so much about guys that, I can't remember the name of the guy that the NRA loves to talk about him. This guy that had like 46 different weapons trafficking violations, and they all just got dropped. And so he was back out on the street. He had supplied guns for all kinds of cartels and stuff, drug dealers and shit. And he was walking around free, and he ended up murdering somebody. And people came back and said, man, you had him dead. When a guy breaks into a home, or is doing a dope deal or something, and he has a gun on him, possession of a gun at that point in time is mandatory minimum sentencing. I think it's like 5 years in Connecticut. But they don't, oh no, we don't want to do that. We don't, because they don't want to lock people up. They'd rather let them out, let them run around and terrorize people.
Yeah, it's because they're scared of budget. And when they get that budget flag thrown in their face, now they're looking at, okay, so we got to take care of these guys who are really committing petty things. And I'm not saying guns. I'm talking maybe small drug use charges, over exaggerated speeding tickets, stupid stuff, right? The little tiny things. So, well, realistically, you're going to jail for 10 years because we found a marijuana seed in your glove box or something stupid. Now we got to pay for that guy. So I think everything should be judged on a individual basis anyways, but I don't think there should be any leniency because he's like, hey, look, I got 5 kids and a wife to feed. But, selling crack was really what I was wanting to do with my life to begin with. So you should just give me a year and let me get back out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm fine with throwing the book at these guys. But, I mean, as far as the mandatory minimum, I don't think it's constitutional.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had to think about it for a little while. I hadn't really thought of that before, but yeah, I don't think I like the idea of it.
Yeah, but someday we'll have a conversation and you can explain to me why you think mandatory minimums are unconstitutional. Because I don't think there's anything in the Constitution that restricts the right's ability to assess a penalty for a crime.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, they've been challenged, I'm sure.
I don't think it's unconstitutional. I just don't like the idea of mandatory minimums.
Yeah, and that's cool. I respect that.
So let's talk about a law that I'm wondering if anybody knows about, and I guess I've heard about it before, but it is called the V something. I don't remember, so I'm waiting for why is this taking so long? Waiting for this to show up here. It is called it's not the V something, it's the Lautenberg Amendment from 1996. Anybody heard of this one before?
I don't think so.
So it's from 1996, and it's enacted. The 104th Congress enacted it, and it bans access to firearms, convicted of people, whatever, and then sponsored by whatever the. Hold on, is this the right one? No, not this one.
That one's a domestic violence.
Yeah, that's domestic violence, the Lautenberg.
This one here. That's the one I was thinking of. So this Tie-Hart Amendment. Anybody heard of this one? 2003. So it stops the ATF from publicly releasing data showing where criminals purchase their firearms. So only law enforcement have that information.
Well, that's kind of weird because they went after the guys that sold the kid that did Sandy Hook.
Well, now if the law enforcement chooses to release it, that's up to them, I'm sure. But this is the ATF and their investigations. That information isn't public record. I mean, it makes sense to me if they're doing something where they've got an informant, Fast and Furious or something like that, or if they've got something where they're what do you call that, where they got a plant or whatever, what do they call that, undercover guy, or if they're tracking stuff. I mean, I can see where they don't want just some Yahoo getting in the way or messing everything up for them or whatever. But I got this from I think Time Magazine article, and they really put a spin on it as though this was something that the gun industry created so that their wording was, I didn't use their wording, but their wording was to the effect of, to shroud the gun industry from the black market in guns and to, give them an anonymity so that they could continue their trafficking.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that that one kind of got past me. I'm going to read into it, but that's kind of some information that can kind of, you think about it, the way the media, and we've been talking about media tonight, but the way they're kind of portraying some of these things that actually is a pretty dang good idea, especially, let's say, now that your informants and stuff won't get exposed. or somebody in the public can't be, oh man, they've been buying those things on 3rd Street or something, you know. So, but
they do make people aware when there's a bad FFL that's doing stuff. They'll either bust them and then tell everybody what they were doing when it happens. It's not like it happens often. All right, let's go look at that other one again. How was it? L something, right? Plantenberg. So yeah, this one is the domestic violence one. And again, this one was off of that Time Magazine thing, and they made it sound like it was something that we would have a problem with. But this is the one that changed it from misdemeanor to domestic violence. Is, you know, you have the 10 questions and you can't be a felon, or a misdemeanor domestic violence. I don't remember. I kind of remember when the 4473s were changed. They have this one. Anybody heard of that one before, though?
Yeah, most states already had a version of that. Most states already taken the non-felony, a couple of the non-felony, you know, fairly violent things and added them. So, and I think there's also a rule about, even if it's a misdemeanor, if it carries a sentence over a year, then they can treat it like a felony.
Well, not in a 4473, but that might be, like you say, one of those states that does additional stuff. They might.
Yeah, that might be our DSP3, because ours is a little more involved because we're Connecticut.
Here's a question: what do you guys think about people getting their gun rights back after they've, like, say, served their time, or, you know, so to speak, whatever, after they've not been in trouble for a while? Obviously, if they rob somebody at gunpoint, then, you know, they should never get it back. But
back in the day, you got out of jail and got your guns back.
Yeah.
You can be on the streets, then why shouldn't you have your rights back? If you don't have your rights back, then why are you on the streets?
I know in Kansas, depending on what you were convicted of, you can petition the court for your rights back. But it's a pretty long, drawn-out process. But I believe in the case of domestic violence, you don't even have that option.
Right, exactly. It's when you're just doing something dumb, you can get your rights back. But when you're, I don't know, it's probably a whole list of violent ones where you can't.
I don't know how it is everywhere, but here in Michigan, it's pretty easy to catch a domestic violence charge. And you never even have to be violent.
Yeah, you could just be yelling at each other, and they consider verbal abuse a form of domestic violence up here.
Yep. That's how it is here, too.
Well, that's when you try to regulate something that's literally emotions, right? Like, how do you know? And then 10 minutes later, are people feeling the same way about things? And 2 days later and 2 weeks later and all that. I can understand the felony stuff for sure. And then add the domestic violence stuff. If somebody's got the ability to beat on somebody that they live with, that's a pretty good indication that they're not sound, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, too many people that are upset with that one, really. I don't know anybody really that has a problem with that one. But then I've mentioned this one before when I was driving around on the big trip. I remember driving through New Mexico and listening to NPR, and they were talking about the concept that that's a loophole. The thing we were just looking at was a loophole because it requires you to be living in the same place with the person. So they were exploring the concept of not so much for guns, but just in general, like how do you get a restraining order? How do you get a domestic abuse thing against somebody you dated or somebody that you didn't even date, but they're just stalking you? And that was pretty creepy because they didn't even get into the guns thing. But of course, my mind went straight to the guns thing from where they were going. But they had some sheriff or some police guy on there who was trying to tell them, you know, what the potential slippery slope of that one is when all you have to do is date or know someone and they can start putting legal ramifications on you, like, you know, the stuff that has consequence legally. What do you think of that?
Well, I got one kind of pertaining to that. Okay, so would it be a better suggestion, instead of taking and adding that to the 4473 and being something that has to deal with losing your firearms over a misdemeanor, and just turning the domestic violence into a felony? I'm pretty sure that they got tossed around at least once, I imagine. I mean, I'm not for that at all. That's just kind of my question.
I mean, there's felony domestic abuse, and then there's misdemeanor domestic abuse. I think the misdemeanor is, like you say, when you're just yelling and screaming and the police have to show up or something. I don't know what the definitions are, but I think there is already felony domestic abuse.
Right, but I'm saying, instead of just having the misdemeanor and the felony, just make everything the felony, and then now it's not on the 4473.
I have no idea. I mean, what are the ramifications of that in the real world? I mean, not pertaining to guns, just in general. I mean, I have no idea. Why are there misdemeanors and felonies? There's got to be some line between.
Bad
Well,
and not so
it's the
bad.
same reason. I'm sorry, Potatoes. Go ahead.
I was just saying bad and not so bad. That's the fine line.
Well, it gets even worse, because here in Connecticut, there's the I'm sorry, I'm having my brain just farted on me here. So we actually have there's a whole domestic abuse thing where all a person has to do is say, I'm in fear, and the guy has guns, and what do you call it? A judge can check the box that says go impound his weapons. But then there's also a protective order. But the difference is, in a protective order, there has to be an investigation. And if you lie on a protective order, that's bad. You can get arrested for that. If you make something up and they find out you made it up, they can go after you and put you in jail for falsifying a statement like that. But on a domestic order, there's no such requirement, which is why when we tried to pass the law that said we're going to change it. See, domestic order with the checkbox didn't actually have the force of law. They could suggest to the guy that he turn his guns in, but he didn't really have to. But the cops were sending letters to people's houses saying, you must do this, to try to scare them into turning the guns in. But that's what happened. They tried to get that to be, because the cops were acting that way anyway, they were trying to pass laws to cover the cops' butt because they were acting illegally.
I'm going to flip the script on you, because I just found something kind of interesting about serializing firearms. This little website says, address firearm suicide. More than 60% of Americans that die each year of a firearm injury were victims of suicide. By tracing firearms recovered at the scenes of these deaths, police may help gather data that may allow public health researchers to design better programs for intervening and preventing these deaths. So serializing firearms will help prevent suicide.
No, that's a lie.
Again, then let's talk about how long we've been serializing guns, and if suicide's been going up or down, and what efforts are being made, and if there are efforts being made, how much they're spending on that. Is it our money? I expect it would be. I looked over here, and this law office in California broke it down that blah, 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 criminal offense entails inflicting physical injury on a cohabitant, spouse, fellow parent, or someone that accused has dated. And then for a misdemeanor, it would be criminal offense in which is accused of committing battery against a cohabitant, spouse, fellow parent, or someone the accused has dated. So battery versus physical injury. So physical injury turns it into a felony. So smacking her around would be a felony. And I don't know. I mean, again, I have no problem with that, but I don't smack around anybody. So I don't know what that would cause to society.
I've got a friend. His wife, she was an alcoholic for a while, and he was trying to leave because she was getting all crazy and try to start a fight or whatever, and she kept getting in between him and the door and shoving him. So he's like, all right, I'm calling the cops, right? So he called the cops. She jumped on him for calling the cops, like literally jumped on him and bit him. And he's like, you know, trying to get out the door or whatever. Cops show up. They put him in handcuffs, haul him away. And he was like, dude, look at my freaking hand. Like, there's teeth marks in my hand. And they're like, oh, that was a defensive wound. What were you doing to her? So they take him out of there in handcuffs. They ask his 12-year-old kid, who's not her kid, it's just his kid, who's staying the weekend there, what happened. Kid tells them what happened. They say, okay, now do you know the difference between telling the truth and telling what happened? And kid is like 12 years old. From what my buddy said, without skipping a beat, said, is that a trick question or a stupid one? They haul him out of there. They charge him with felony domestic violence and charged him with it on her behalf, even though she was saying, no, he didn't do it. Like she wasn't like arguing who was at fault. She was saying, no, I did it. Don't charge him with that. Don't arrest him. I did it. He called the cops on me. They still took him out of there in handcuffs, set a court date. Then they both got fined for not showing up because the only way he wouldn't have had that on his record and been charged is if she didn't show up. So she never showed up. He went, they dropped the case or whatever, but then they still had to pay the fine. He got charged even though both sides say, no, she was at fault. She did it. He didn't do anything wrong. He still got charged. So like it's so easy to catch a charge like that. I think it needs to be a little more open to interpretation.
Microchip recording. the invention of Skynet.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny you bring that up because my wife's been flipping out recently because I've been putting security cameras basically everywhere outside the house. I'm not putting more, I'm just upgrading the old ones that are there to new 6 megapixel 4K HD security cameras. And I was like, man, I think I'm going to put one in the house that's looking at the front door. And she's like, no, that's just creeper. Like, I was like, how is that creeper to have a camera inside your house so you know what the hell's going on all the time? Like, so isn't that something that also be like, hey, look, I got freaking physical evidence that she's getting drunk and freaking punching me in the back of the head while I'm trying to leave or biting me or whatever you were saying. And it's like that kind of thing can be beneficial for everybody in the household.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, but I just don't understand how they were still taking him away in handcuffs and charging him when both parties said she was at fault. But they don't remove a woman from a household when there's kids. The man is always the one that gets removed in Michigan, no matter what the situation is.
Stereotype. I mean, there's a better word for it than stereotypes, but yeah, it's the stereotypical thing that's going to happen.
Well, that's your advantage of being part of the male patriarchy, don't you know? That's one of the advantages.
It's male privilege.
All right. Well, we're going to take a step away from our male privilege and take a commercial break and get copyright striked. And you talked about having a camera at your planted at your door. Now you have this vacuum cleaner with an iPod on it. That'll be even better than that because it's got a movie projector on it, so it'll stand next to your bed. I don't know if you noticed this, but it stands next to your bed watching you when you sleep.
Oh, that's Wally's cousin, Frankie.
And then whenever you wake up, it knows it, and then it shines this thing on the wall, and then you can see what's going on, Facebook, right? And then you can touch it. All right, and then later on, when you're working underneath the sink, you'll use its movie projector to show what's going on, so you don't know how to fix your pipes. And then if you don't have enough light down there, look what that robot's going to do. Right on. So then over here, the kid doesn't know how to play the piano yet. Well, first off, hold on. Kid doesn't know how to play the piano. The robot's going to teach your kid how to play the piano. But your other kid, you don't want to have to play with that kid. It's a waste of time. Your robot will play with that kid. And then little robot balls. If you don't know how to play Tai Chi or whatever, they'll put a movie projector on the wall. And listens to all your cell phone calls now. So there you go. Teach your kid how to make bombs.
That's what I'm talking about. I need one for every room.
Yeah, so it drives around, and when you're not home, it just drives around staring at things. It tells if you're sick or not. It tells you're sick. But it'll drive around when you're not home and turn off your lights so you're not wasting electricity and wasting the carbons. But see that? She's monitoring what's going on in her house with the vacuum cleaner. So it's driving around the house, showing her what's going on. And then adjusting temperatures and turn on and off lights and whatnot. Look at this. It drives around on like a antiperspirant ball. So it's sort of like a Segway, except it's on that ball. And then I guess you can program it to do funny things. And then let's say the grandparents come over. It'll identify them. Won't kill them, but they'll very slowly be walked into wherever you want them to go. Very slowly. And then whenever they get there, they can watch a movie, and the grandkids allowed to come out from that point.
I don't know. It opened the door before I knew who they were.
Well, vacuum cleaner does that for you. You can be in another room. And now you don't have to read your kids bedtime stories either. Robots can do that for you.
Now,
So-
is it armed? I mean, they could put tasers or something on it,
I don't know.
Flamethrower.
or at least bite somebody.
Look at that. That's how it drives around on a big ball. How cool is that? So that's a thing, and it's already got a YouTube video, so get ready. You don't even need cameras anymore. You'll just have robots driving around your house, staring at you when you're sleeping, and patrolling your house.
Right on. I got a 3-year-old that stares at me while I sleep already. So now if I teach him to clean stuff and turn down and turn off lights, I think I'll be good.
You know, it's only a matter of time before those robot dogs, you know, the video with the robot dogs, one opens the door for the other or whatever.
Yeah.
The second dog that goes through it's only a matter of time before the second dog that goes through the door has like an M249 saw on its back.
Yeah. Why do you think they're teaching them to open doors for each other? First thing they teach
What?
them how to walk around. Second thing, how to open doors for each other.
Yep.
Third
One
thing-
opens the door for the other one to run in with an M249 saw and eliminate every human in the building.
Now,
Third
that
thing,
robot,
human anatomy.
it could just turn up the heat and kill you. It doesn't even need a gun. So you just turn up the heat until it's totally intolerable in there. All right, so I don't know how long we've been going.
I'm sorry, G, but I got to laugh at that. The way you said it's just completely intolerable in there. I'm picturing in my mind a robot coming in and like turning off the air conditioning for somebody like where I live down in Southeast Texas, and just going, "Oh man, it's just way too hot in here. I can't deal with it." And they just like pass out because it's like 90 degrees and 100% humidity in their home. Like
Right.
not even leaving, they just stay in there
Exactly.
because it's yeah.
Even hotter. And then you can like fight with the robot, like get me an ice water, and then be like, nope. Yeah. I have no idea what's going on anymore. So can it make sandwich? No, but there are other robots. That is one of like 12 robots I found on YouTube. These are already robots with videos that are selling them. They run from like $3,000 down. So the most expensive one is like $3 or $4,000. A lot of them look like little dogs. They run around doing things, and they're like security cameras that are mobile, which is kind of cool. A couple of them look like kind of like a really shitty R2-D2. And then, yeah, I'm just waiting for one to have arms on it, and then it'll do stuff. So they're already doing these on YouTube. They're already putting them on the like, what are you going to have in your house in 2017, 2018 type of thing. So it won't be too long before we have little robots running around doing stuff.
Well, can that thing go up a flight of stairs?
That one I don't know, because that's
That's one weakness, Gary. One weakness,
roll-on
stairs.
deodorant. No, it's got that roll-on deodorant thing. So if it can scoot, I don't know if it can scoot fast enough to get up a stair, but if it had one arm, it sure could climb itself up a stair, I bet. And I know it can go down a stair, because it's like a Segway, right? It can just roll off and stop, and roll off and stop, roll off and stop. The other ones, I don't think could, because they look more like dogs. They have like 4 legs and stuff. Or maybe they can. I don't know. It's pretty scary. So, yeah, it won't be too long. But if any of you have kids, your kids will have robots. R2D2 had
That is kind of freaking scary. You think about like the amount of invasion that you're actually bringing in your home. It's bad enough that your Samsung TV listens to you.
Buddy of mine that I used to work with, he accidentally caught his wife cheating on him by installing cameras in his house. Didn't even mean to.
You just didn't tell her, or she just was like, all right, you're going to find out.
Unintended consequences.
I think she thought that the cameras didn't work in the dark.
Oh.
Somebody was over there to be sleeping on the couch or something, and she like acted like she was walking out of the room, turning off the light. And as soon as the light went off, she turned around and ran back to the couch.
That's why we need to educate our youth.
All right. Well, anything else? We do a gun shop today. I'm going to do a shop I found out about in San Antonio. It's not really, you know what? I'm just going to go to the map because I don't know what the name of the place is. I was doing my project here and I found a place in San Antonio I never heard about, and I can't remember the name of because it's like called like the International Shooting Range or something kind of generic. And now I'm getting there, so we'll come back over here. I'm still screen sharing, right? Yeah. And we zoom in, San Antonio. It's on this edge of San Antonio someplace. Is it over by here somewhere? No. Got it. All right, anybody know what I'm looking for here? Is this it? All right, that's what I'm looking for. Shooting range. National Shooting Complex. There we go. So I was looking at this place, and it turns out it's the museum for the American Trap Association. There's a couple of different trap and skeet places, or maybe that's the skeet one. This might be the skeet one. Those look like skeet houses. So this is the American Skeet Association, and it's kind of neat history, and skeet shooting's been around for a while. And I was just looking at this place and kind of bummed out that I missed it when I went to San Antonio. It's not too far from some of the gun shops we went to. We kind of zoomed around this whole area. So when I was looking at it, I was just sort of wondering how one of the biggest and most established shooting places might be. So I was zooming in on Google and looking at it, right? Figuring out how you drive in. There's some sort of a fancy range right here. Some kind of actual place here, which I'm guessing is where the museum is, because that's the only real building there. Then there's a road over here, and it goes to a whole thing of bays over here. These are all skeet towers and stuff. And then it looks like there's some regular shooting here, some kind of real guns maybe. And then you come over here, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. I just thought that was kind of cool. There's obviously big events that go on here and stuff. And then I was looking, there's like a berm of sand or something here, I think. That's must be so that people don't freak out when they drive down that road seeing a bunch of people shooting towards them. You know, shotgun can't go that far, right? So it's not really a big deal, but still, I was surprised that there's not even trees or anything. So coming back over to this one, I was digging around again looking, and I noticed that there's, in these woods, there's going to be other stuff. What is that called? Sporting clays. You know, where they're walking through here. You can see all the red stains or whatever from the positions and what. So I was like, oh, there's red stains all over the place, right? So I went over here and I'm like, oh yeah, look, there's all kinds of red stains here. So that's all the pigeons, right? All the clay birds that they've shot over the years. It's all red and whatever.
Yeah, orange.
Go back over
That's
here.
a-
And it's like, man, these things
That's
are
a huge
super
complex.
Yeah, seriously. So then I started thinking about it, and you're like, look how long you can see that red, right? So look at all that red. I mean, there's really nothing else red, that big or red in the whole area. Start backing out. There's some roofs over here that are red, and somewhere there's like that's this football track or whatever this is called, a racetrack that's all red. But look at how big that red is. You can get to pretty far out in space and still see that red. I thought that was kind of neat.
I think that's one of the largest like shotgun complexes I've ever seen. Because that is a ton of trap setup. I mean, the sporting clay, skeet houses, everything. That's huge.
Yeah, well, like I say, it's the headquarters of the National Sporting Clays Association. It's the museum for the American Skeet Association. They hold international events here. So I'm guessing it probably started at some point and then got bigger. I think they said they've been in this location since 1930. So it's been here for a while. All these houses must know that it's here. This is all just RV spots. That's quite a few. And then this, I'm guessing, is like when they have their fancy championships or whatever. This must be where they have them, right? One.
How far off of I-10 is that?
So that's it right there.
I wonder if that was actually a star shot range.
Oh. Would it be that big? It has a big building like you're talking about.
I don't see the metal structure you'd need, though.
Well, but they could have got rid of that. So I'll flip it back off. And it's kind of far from I-10. I-10's at like 11. It's at like 9, 10.
Yeah, it's a little ways out.
So that's our gun shop today, National Shooting Complex. Let's go talk about, where's my Instagram app? Let's go talk about my Instagram for a second. Anybody who was watching that one today, I didn't even know about this, and I'm super butthurt. So, anybody see this post? No, somebody's replying to it, but it looks like there's some sort of secret that I'm posted on there. Cheryl and Dan are the people at Gun Freedom Radio up in like Carefree, Arizona or something up by Phoenix, are soaking in so much knowledge this week at the Arsenals of History, Ethics of Firearms Museums Symposium being held by whoever and curator of the Cody Firearms Museum at the Buffalo Bills Center of the West. So, yeah, some sort of Arsenals of History. I don't even know what this is. Anybody heard of this?
No, I'd never seen it.
So I don't know who you got to know to get in on shit like this. I guess hang out on stupid Facebook. But invites you to attend Arsenals of History, Ethics of Firearms in Museums, a symposium. There, okay, we already said all that. Museum with firearm collections, blah, blah, blah. May 21st, museum is open to the public and free. Damn it. May 22nd to 23rd. I don't even want to look over here. Oh, cycle up.
I think Cycle Camp just went to go there.
Seriously. I'm going to look at my schedule. Actually, I think I'd have been home by now. No, I'd have been in Denver this weekend. I know where I'd have been. I would have been in fucking Denver this last weekend. Fuck, I would have been literally, I'm going to my 2018 tour here. I would have been going to the gun show April 13th. May, what would it be? May, Denver Antique Show, yeah. So I would have been, well, would have been cool. Anyway, I could have told you in at this thing. Presenters of the symposium include speakers from our own Cody Museum, the Autry Museum, which is fucking phenomenal, the Met, never been there, School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I've heard they've got a massive collection of like engraved and art guns that's supposed to be world class. I'm going to go check that out at the Gun Rights Policy Conference. The NRA Museum, I've been there and in the guts of it, down in the basement. Colonial Williamsburg, I've been there when I was a little kid. The Dutch Military Museum, I've never been there. Royal Armories, never been there. And the U.S. Marshals Museum. But how cool is that they've got presenters from all these different museums doing some sort of free, well, I guess it's not free, to attend the full symposium as a museum professional. A $50 advance registration is required. It's a big look. But basically, how cool would that have been? Hear about how museums are presenting their firearms, or the ethics of presenting their firearms. I'm hoping that would have been cool. So we've got Gun Freedom Radio, which is we've featured on before, Cheryl and that other dude, and they do a radio show, and they're pretty active in Second Amendment stuff. So I'm hoping that they'll do some sort of coverage on it. Saw this picture too. That's the dude from there, and then who's this? Oh, President and CEO of NSSF. Thought-provoking talk about the role of gun collections in museums in today's debate over firearms. Yeah, that seems super interesting. This is the guy from the NRA TV show. Look, they had some kind of fancy coffee cups too. This is the Bunker Sands Photo Gallery. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty cool thing. So I never heard of it. I'm going to put it on my calendar for next year. What do you guys think? Would you ever go to something like that?
Yeah, that
I
might
would
be
totally go. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Looks pretty cool to me.
Considering I've lived in Wyoming and was only like 6 hours away from it, I would totally go.
So now I'm going over to the gun chat or the YouTube side, and Midnight's asking if there's still a Chapnapper patch. There was never a Chapnapper patch. There was a Chapnapper badge. We used to have badges on gun channels, which were little like electronic little things that would happen to your profile, like, you know, getting a little blue thing on eBay instead of a green thing on eBay when you reach a certain amount of sales. So they were just these little badges. They came along with a project we were working on one time. You know, I had to buy some little plug-in, and they were part of the plug-in. So we used them for like the first 25 people that joined, and I don't know, moderators and a couple other things that people had done or stuff. And whenever Ed started passing out, and then Bob fell asleep, got eaten by a cat, and I don't know, a couple of 3 or 4 other people. Stone Guy used to fall asleep all the time. We started doing the Chapnapper badge, and then a whole bunch of people had it at some point, but there's never been a patch. I guess we could, but there's no list anymore. I wonder if I have the list, actually. There is probably a list in the database. I could go try to find it. Nobody said anything on the gun channel side, so I'm guessing on that side where everybody's fading out. On the YouTube side, we got 17 thumbs up out of 24, so appreciate that. We're posting the shows on iTunes, so I haven't looked over there, but if you are paying attention to the iTunes, we do appreciate it. If you're listening to the stuff over there, leaving us a comment, and I guess a rating would be great. I know the comment is what they're looking for over there. And anybody got anything going on in here? Cycle? Anything coming up? Did you get that starter fixed, replaced?
Oh God, that's another horrible story. It turns out it wasn't the starter after all. I spent $250 for nothing.
Ugh.
It was the wiring under the seat is screwed up, and that's what was causing it not to turn. It turns out there's 2 different starter solenoids in that one in series because of the interlocks they have for various stuff. So, but I got it figured out, so that's good.
Is that money out, or you can return it?
Nah, I'm just going to leave it in there. God, it takes too long to. It's like in the middle of the bike, and you have to tear the whole side of it off to get it in there.
Okay, so it's just like you got a decent starter that'll replace this one if it ever goes out again.
Yeah, yeah.
Right on. Any shows coming up? Any more reviews?
Nothing yet. I gotta shoot. What's his name's monthly challenge target there? Ghost. I gotta shoot the Ghost the Ghost Drill it a month. I haven't done that yet.
Is this one still the spell stuff out of the letters?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, unless you got to jump out, I'm gonna jump back over to screen sharing here for a second. And I've been working on this project, and one of the things that kind of was a side branch of it, I was doing the the 2A history timeline, and I got a bunch of sporting stuff that started to accumulate, and it was just cluttering the list. Look how much stuff there is just in the sporting timeline. So I think it's it's interesting and worth going into it. So I think Cycle, if you're into a lot of this stuff, you might be the person who'd be most interested with maybe Dead Horse or anybody else who's interested. But I'd like to go through and dig into some of these things as you know I like to do with live chats, and go through and talk about evolution of the sport and shooting sports. We'd be down with that sometime.
Yeah.
There's a little cheat sheet. I'm going to develop that more. It's just not as important as the 2A stuff for me. So eventually I'm going to dig into that a little bit a little bit deeper, because I think there's all kinds of neat stuff. Because honestly, it's kind of neat. The Olympics started with shooting, and I think there's a lot of credit. I think I'm really debating whether to call the guy who created the modern Olympics a 2A advocate. Of the first Olympics, there were 9 sports, and there was 4 pistol events and 2 high-power rifles. There's been firearms in every single Olympics except for 2 out of all of them, all the modern ones. So it's kind of neat. And I didn't give the Olympics as much respect as I think I should have.
Well, those are the modern Olympics where they wore clothes.
Yeah. Modern Olympics, like 40 events, the first one. And it wasn't, I don't know, I never really paid attention to it until I started doing this. But like I say, I also started looking at things like the trap and skeet and where they come from. I just barely got into like IDPA and through Glock in here. But, you know, once I start putting in the modern shooting sports into here, 3-gun and stuff, it's going to get even more packed. So anyway, I look forward to that in the future when you got some time. We can do that anytime, really. Let's see. Still nothing. Oh, no, here we go. Let me see. I don't know. I just scrolled up. Nope, still nothing on the gun channel side, YouTube side. Gun of the day. Do we have a gun of the day?
No, I don't have any.
Potatoes, what's the next gun you're going to buy?
Build another AR. But how about the HK G3?
HK G3. I don't think we've ever picked that one before. So good about that gun.
Big thumping 308, 20-round magazines. They are combat accurate. I wouldn't say they're really accurate. Reliable. I just really like that design. The roller delayed blowback is interesting to me.
It's a pretty robust design.
That's the thing. They're so heavy. I like the look of them, but I don't like carrying them around or nothing. So is that roller action good?
I think it is. I like mine.
Yeah, they function whether clean, dirty, wet, dry. I mean, as long as the cartridge does what the cartridge is supposed to do, the action will cycle its way through.
Sand?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. The chamber's fluted, so like if you reload, like don't plan on reloading for that. So, but like it leaves a lot of space for particulate and whatnot. You know, you can stick a muddy old round in there and it'll chamber and fire no problem. And it ejects the rounds with so much force, man. Like they fly. You could be all the way in the left stall at the range, and the guy all the way at the right is really pissed at you.
Yeah, they'll chuck brass like, what, 30, 40 feet sometimes?
Oh, yeah, at least.
Cycle, what do you think of the G3?
That is pretty cool. I like how they the roller lock mechanism is supposed to be one of the better semi-automatic and subgun action. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've got a PTR 91, but one of these days I'll have a G3.
There was voted only one gun that was more reliable than a G3, and that was the Uzi.
By who? Yeah. Just some guy on the street you met one time?
They are heavy too. Did we mention that? Heavy?
And they're long.
They were definitely the bee's knees before the AR-15 became a thing. They're pretty cool. They're better than a FAL. All right, so that's our gun of the day.
They're
It's
not
funny
as,
that Wiki doesn't list a weight for it. It's kind of weird.
They're in the 11-pound range.
Oh,
There's
really.
probably so many of them. But you would think it would give you a standard one.
I didn't realize it was that heavy.
Yeah, I think like in between 8 to 11 pounds. They're freaking heavy. They're chunky.
I'll have to go weigh mine one of these days. It's definitely not practical these days. But
No, but in the 1950s, when you're just getting out of a world war, and you're thinking and say, hey, what's going to be the next big thing? Everybody else is using bolt action still, right? Because the Germans went into WW2 with bolt actions.
Yep.
So in the 1950s, it's like 20 rounds of 308. Why not? That's going to be awesome. It's heavy. It's reliable. It works in the desert. It works in the jungle. It works everywhere. So why not?
and you can do the HK slap. I mean,
Yeah.
that right there is cool points.
Well, they're saying in the YouTube side that Clint Walker died. So I guess he's an actor from a show called Cheyenne Bodie. No, Cheyenne from 1955 to 1963. Anybody see that show?
No.
I'm familiar with it only because I lived in Cheyenne, Wyoming, but it was never filmed there. And people always talked about it.
I've never seen the show, I don't think. Well written and acted, hugely popular for 8 seasons.
I've seen it, but that's because I'm old.
Was it a good show?
It was okay. It was, the Cheyenne was just like, that was when everybody was Me Tooing it.
Right.
So every time they came out with a Gunsmoke clone or that kind of thing, everybody just jumped on it.
Well, that's why I'm wondering if since I haven't seen it in reruns ever, at least not like Rawhide or something like that, it must not have been as like one.
But Walker's like our Ness. He's a real tall dude.
So, I guess he died?
Yeah, he just died a couple days ago. Too bad.
Oh, yeah, it says on the 18th. He's 22nd, so that was right. That makes me think that we could
Mine says 21st, so I don't know.
So I'm glad somebody mentioned that, though, because that made me think of history. So try to jump into the calendar here. Am I still screen sharing?
No.
Nope.
So can you hear my mouse scribbling all around when I do this?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's annoying. So it is a couple of things going on. So today is the 22nd still, at least for me. And that means it's Makarov's birthday. So it is Makarov, and he died this month, and he was born this month, just a couple of years apart. So guy that invented the Makarov, and he did some other stuff too, I think. That guy, and then more importantly, Cincinnati Revolt was day before yesterday, depending on where you are. So that's when the NRA leadership was changed out by Neil Knox and Harlan, and they basically contacted all the life members of the NRA. 1,000 of them, I think, showed up. 1,500 of them voted proxy or vice versa. But they mobilized 2,500 life members, and they ousted the existing leadership of the NRA. And this was a reaction to the 1968 Gun Control Act, that they felt that the two guys in the new leadership of the NRA felt that the old leadership had been soft and allowed the 68 Gun Control Act to go through without enough reaction. So was a time when they did it, I think, effectively. It was before the internet. Knox had been using mass mailings to get the word out about the 68 Gun Control Act, and use that same method to get the life members to mobilize. They showed up at the meeting, the national meeting in Cincinnati, and at whatever time it was, they all put on an orange hat. So a hat was real easy to see in the crowd. Everybody started to put on a hat. It was obvious, and it was easy to see who was part of the effort. And I guess they stayed there for a long time, and put the actual work into it, and changed out the leadership there, and went forward with different goal, I guess you could say, with the NRA. They had planned to actually, the old leadership had planned to get less into politics, and the result was the new leadership created the NRA ILA. So that was created right away, and we all know the stories of that. So it wasn't perfect, and it's an example of membership of an organization not destroying the organization. They've been around for 100 and something years at that time, 150 now, but instead changing the leadership and taking the thing in the new direction. It's interesting because I'm reading the book now, Gun Rights, the Gun Right War, and it's difficult to read because it's an accumulation of Knox's articles, his articles from different magazines and publications throughout the years, and it's sort of grouped in topics, but it's not something I can just sit down and go through and read all the stuff that's pertinent to the Cincinnati Revolt or anything else. So I think it was earlier this morning I actually read something that pertained to this. After the Cincinnati Revolt, Harlan, what's his name, was the president of the NRA, and I think Knox was the president of the ILA for a year, I think, and then he had a fight with the NRA, and they kicked him out. They got rid of him, and years went by, and they were friends again, and then Knox came back to the NRA, and they tried to basically change it from within, I guess, and got to the point where he was going to be the president, and the president of the NRA ran for president, lost by 3 votes to, what's his name? Charlton Heston. So Charlton Heston became the president of the NRA. His first act with Lane LaPierre was to make a speech that we didn't need AK-47s on the streets. And then his next speech after that was, more shall not be infringed and from my cold dead hands. And then they kept that line for a while. So anyway, in all that time, again, it's not a perfect organization. It's not easy to deal with a thing that's involved so many people and such important consequences and everything. But Harlan took Knox aside. Where I was going to get to is he said, you got to look at the NRA changes leadership every 10 years, and gave him the example that the 68 turned into the 1977 revolt. There was one 10 years before that, approximately 8 or 10 years before that, when some senator allowed or almost allowed like a handgun ban to go through somewhere in the South. 10 years before that or something was another one, and then before that was the 34. So there's been times that the organization has changed its leadership based on its ineffectiveness or the leadership's direction that wasn't in line with the rest of the membership. So anyway, so history's those who aren't aware of history are doomed to repeat it. So doing our effort here to make people aware of it so that we stand on the shoulders of those that came before us and we don't just go into these same cycles and these same patterns, and instead become a difficult target for the antis and be better advocates ourselves, so that we get us back to a position like we had in '94, where the politicians were scared shitless for decades because there was consequences to their anti-gun actions. So anyway, that's our day in history.
Yep. Arthur Conan Doyle born today too.
Right on. Yeah, I don't have my notes up to look at my normal cheat sheet for history stuff. If anybody has any regular history stuff, let me know.
Today was the first major wagon train to the Northwest. And then unfortunately they created California, I guess, but can't win them all.
Well, the wagon trains weren't until after the gold rush and everything, right? That was when people started wanting to bring their families and stuff over and more stuff.
Yeah.
Or at least when they started getting the fever. I think the first ones were, I mean, I guess they already had the territories and stuff by the time. Yes.
Yeah, the major wagon trains didn't start until the 50s. And then the computer game wasn't out until the 90s.
The 8-bit version. All right. Well, again, we appreciate everybody for tuning in. We got 24 out of 24 thumbs up over there. Can't ask for more than 100%. So I do appreciate the people that took the time to do that. It's an exercise just to remember that we're all audience until we click something, and then we're creating influence. We're telling the systems we want this, and we're giving it a little bit of a boost so that when something gets decided to be recommended, that has a little bit more credibility, and it's a worthy effort. So we appreciate it. We can continue to do that on the shows that you're all watching out there as well. I think I started asking people what they were doing. We started asking Cycle Camp about the starter, and we got off topic there. So Gary, you got anything coming up? Been doing chat.
Oh, not that I can think of. I know I did one last Friday. I don't know if that's going to become a regular thing or not. It kind of depends on Ellis and whether or not he wants me to. He asked me to fill in last Friday, so.
I don't think I've had a chance. Sorry, I'm yawning. It's late. I haven't had a chance to thank you for that video you posted on the main page the other day where you did that quick interview with the guy and kind of a tour of his table with those engraved and rare guns.
Oh, thanks. There's a rather interesting story about that guy.
Okay.
Turns out if you Google him, a couple years ago, there was a tri-state gun show up in Evansville, Illinois, where there was a veteran with a service dog who was denied entrance, if everybody remembers that. And he was the person in charge of that gun show.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's interesting. Well, he certainly felt like comfortable in front of the camera. It seemed like he was comfortable, like he'd done that before.
He seemed to be. I mean, I asked him if he wanted to be interviewed, and he says, I guess so.
But anyway, it was cool. I never heard the story of the Colts coming out like that, and showed it to a couple people. We showed it on the Daily Gun Show, or wait, on the Early Watch the other day, maybe on this show too. And everybody got a kick out of it. Dead Horse got a kick out of the Colts out of the back door.
Yeah, those were really some beautiful guns.
Kind of neat how that guy had all mirrors on his table too, and then they were spinning around or doing, on little clear racks. So you've been just walking by, you can appreciate, the 360 degrees of it.
Right, and then he had those bright lights shining down on him too, which made it even neater.
Oh, I guess I didn't notice that. He had his own lights there also. Or you mean just the lights of the place?
I'm not real sure whether he had little mini spotlights on him, whether it was just reflecting the. There's enough light in there, probably didn't need any extra light because it's pretty lit up in there.
Anyway, thanks for joining me again. Potatoes, and doing the lobbies. Appreciate that. You got anything coming up?
No, not really. Just filling in here and there with the lobbies when there's not one up.
Appreciate it, as always. And then, Chelsea, anything coming up?
Yeah, I think we're going to be getting into possibly a knife chat or something, trying to work out some stuff.
Is this when you have one of your 16-minute quick and dirty Sunday chats?
No, this is going to be a 19-minute thing.
Oh.
So just a couple more minutes longer.
Overtime.
No, it'll be a longer show. I just got to get somebody, maybe some more people that are a little bit more knowledgeable than myself about steel construction and metallurgy and all that kind of cool stuff. But other than that, I mean, we do the Friday and the Sunday. Spec Ops might be moving to give the gun gals a longer slot or something. I don't know. So everything's always kind of moving around, I guess. But other than that, we're just doing the same stuff.
Right on. Well, they do a show too long in one spot, and then you end up like Matt and just doing weird stuff. So have fun with it and do the shows when it makes sense for everybody. If you're
and
listening,
that's sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, that's the cool thing about the whole schedule and the way it's set up is really everything. The afternoon's kind of blocked, so the other than the morning and the early watch show, I mean, there's really a lot of time there, and that's free time for a lot of people to view. So it's just kind of finding a way to move into those intermediate slots to really kind of fill that dead space.
Yeah, I've been thinking about moving this show too, but I don't know. We did it for at midday for a while. It kind of depends on your audience too, I suppose. You know, if your audience is available at the time, you're going to do better. So it's just a matter of matching it.
Right. I think still some of the shows are just so packed together that there's really like no breathing room. It's like one show after the other after the other. I mean, that's fine, you know, and it all fits and it all works. But
Well, it
at
depends
the
on
end
who
of
you're
the
talking
day,
about. Like Edge and my show, you know, different audiences, HVS and Matt, you know, different audiences. So a lot of them are sharing audiences, but they don't know. There's people that'll watch Yankee show that could care less about what Clover's talking about and vice versa on Thursdays.
right? I mean, and then that's the nice thing about having the flexibility and more creators out there and everything too.
The old time slot for the Daily Gun Show, I couldn't even watch it.
Talking about the like 4 p.m. one or the new?
Yeah. This one's great. As soon as I get home from work, I can turn it on.
Well, so I guess I'll throw the plea out there. If you are listening to it live, if you're one of those people, or if you're one of the people who are listening to this after the fact, or if you're listening to it on iTunes or something, give us some feedback. The email is dailygunshow@gmail.com. And yeah, I'm looking for feedback on whether or not to do the show at the nighttime slot like this. What did I just open this browser window for? No, it must be getting late because I'm getting tired. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Is I've got a couple of things up on eBay, and I took a minute to talk about them on the early watch show earlier. They're over on Gun Channels on the Daily Gun or on the 24-hour Gun Show. You can get to that through the channels area, or I'm sure you'll see show up in the rotations wherever the channels get rotated every once in a while. Or if you go down to the bottom of any page when you're logged in, it'll say 24-hour Gun Show. I encourage anybody to post things that you might want to buy, sell, or trade. That way, get more and more people checking that area out. I'll be putting a lot of stuff in there in the next days and weeks, so it'll be getting fuller and fuller. Hopefully, that will attract a bunch of people's eyeballs. And if you've got stuff to buy, sell, or trade, throw it in there. Take advantage of those eyeballs, and that'll help me out. It'll help you guys out. Maybe it'll add a little dynamic to Gun Channels if you're doing shows. Remember that the gun show is there, and you can use that as content or to dig into and have content, something to talk about in your shows. And again, I hope Whatever. I guess that's about it. Thanks everybody for joining in. And I think with that, I will quit saying thanks and hit this button. Oh no, I'll hit this button first. Phone went off. It's in there. So, thanks again for everybody joining and everybody watching.
Guys and gals from GovernmentWebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thanks for watching GovernmentWebsites.com.